Hello friends and welcome to my channel. Today's topic is perfume industry and how to get into this industry if you would like to become a perfumer. I hope to share some realistic advice without sugarcoating anything, and also to talk about the diversity in fragrance industry. And so for those who are new to my channel, my name is Victoria. I'm a professionally trained perfumer and a writer, and here I share my experience working in fragrance industry and in my experience in journalism. And so diversity, the topic of diversity in fragrance industry is not merely a lip service to the discussions that are taking place right now, to the issues that are quite dominate our discourse. It's really because if you're coming outside of the fragrance industry, fragrance families, then fragrance industry can appear really intimidating. All of the people who you see mentioned in the news, they are white, they're usually French, they're usually men. And it's very hard to know how to find role models or how to overcome that intimidation. Is it even worth trying? So there are two aspects of that I would like you to be aware. I completely understand the critiques that are made of fragrance industry not being diverse enough, not featuring enough different cultures or backgrounds. And I think that's the issue, basically global. It's not fragrance industry per se, it exists everywhere. But something that's not recognized is that fragrance industry is quite global. So although you see a few of the same faces in media as far as perfumers are concerned, their teams, they're quite large teams who are not becoming, the represented, and those teams are really quite diverse, and there are people from different backgrounds, different skin colors, different ethnicities. It cannot be in any other way because perfume industry, especially over the past, would say like 40 years, has become global. So the fragrance the fragrance industry is not recreating French codes of perfumery necessarily. Because and that's something that I find very unfair to comment about fragrance industry, because a perfume that's going to be launched in Paris, there is expectation that it will sell worldwide, and as a result, perfumers must know what people in Asia prefer. For instance, consumers in Japan are always appreciate citrusy, crisp or fruity notes and floral notes, and those are the kind of accords that become popular in fragrances that are sold in the US and in other countries. Especially big global launches, they aim to please everyone. So not necessarily always with good or positive results. But so also what it means is that a perfumer body at a fragrance supplier house has to include people with different experiences and different backgrounds. It's whether if you are creating fragrances for the Middle Eastern market, then you're expected to know, to be intimately familiar with that market and those codes of perfumery. In my experience at IFF, for instance, I've worked with perfumers who were from Vietnam. In Japan, for instance, Loc Dong, he's a perfumer of Vietnamese descent, and Calvin Klein Euphoria is a fragrance that benefited from his understanding of fruity notes and exotic fruity notes, and he's a master at creating florals and fruity accords, and he managed to leave his mark on IFF's creations ever since he joined. Then there is a young perfumer at IFF that I worked with, Chiaki Nomura, and she's done some really beautiful work. There is, so to say there is no diversity in fragrance industry is not correct. On the other hand, what I find really a problem is that when fragrance companies select a handful of perfumers to promote, almost invariably those people are young French men. And the very traditional and conservative thinking of this goes something like, well, the creative directors on the brand side, on the client side, typically women, so let's select perfumers who will charm them. Of course, I am oversimplifying things, but the end result is this. When you look at most top fragrance companies and see what young perfumers they promote, the result is almost the same. But if you're coming outside fragrance industry, and there is something that's very important that I want to say. This lack of diversity in fragrance industry is not so much by design, but more by oversight, because until recently there was no schooling for perfumery. You were schooled by your parents, by usually your father, and that's how you got into the perfume industry. You often came with your father's formulas, so you were well prepared. It's a very, to me, it's a negative feature of this industry, because then there is almost a spouse dependency. There are people who join the industry just because their parents were in it, and not necessarily because they're really passionate about it. On the other hand, people who are passionate are denied opportunities, or they're not able to pursue what they want simply because it's a small industry. There are only 250 perfumers in the world. So as far as more practical steps that you can take to enter a fragrance industry, especially if you have no connections to it, is one, try to make the connections. Try to look for people, make connections with perfumers, brand managers. It's much easier to do so at small brands and look at, for instance, a chance to work at a small brand is also a great experience, and even something like a year or a few months to learn the industry and to figure out whether it's even for you. Are you willing to continue? Are you willing to put all the effort that would be required if you really wanted to go further and get perfumery training? What I would like to give is a few suggestions on how to approach people, because weekly I receive emails from people interested to become perfumers or to enter the fragrance industry, and I noticed some trends. For instance, contacting someone and asking them to spend 30 minutes talking to them over the phone or Zoom, that's not helpful. Most people would not reply to that email. They're busy, they don't understand why they should take 30 minutes of their day to help you. Second is to ask for contacts directly. For instance, if I receive an email like that, I wouldn't be helpful, because I don't know your background. I don't know why I should share my contacts with you. I need to have a reason. And third is just to give very vague questions, such as, I would like to enter the industry. What should I do? Well, Google. There is ask very specific questions, such as, I finished my master's in chemistry, and I would like to know whether it's worth my while to take up a position as a lab tech, or is a degree in fashion required. there are all sorts of questions. Write them all down and figure out like the contact that you would like to make. What kind of question would be most relevant for them? What kind of question would be interesting for you and interesting for them to answer? And go from there. And don't forget to say thank you. I really can't believe out of all the emails that I receive and how many emails I reply to, only a handful of people reply saying thank you for your time, thank you for your response. I think it's one of the reasons why people are not replying to emails these days, because this kind of etiquette, email etiquette, is really negative. So besides trying to make contacts and reaching out to people, look for perfumers who have social media accounts and follow them and see what they talk about, what kind of issues are at the top of their minds. Try to make connections with them that way. You can learn a lot about different companies based on their perfumers. Again, it's not a very big industry, so certain things become quite obvious. If you feel intimidated that, for instance, a fragrance company you're interested in does not represent people with backgrounds similar to yours, then usually those people are there, but they might be working for in different branches of perfumery. For instance, most people, when they start out, they want to become fine fragrance perfumers because that's the profession that's most in the limelight. But there are perfumers such as technical perfumers, people who do the GC work, who read out the fragrance formula, usually of the competitor fragrances, or people who do reformulations, people who formulate functional perfumes or personal care products. All of those professions are really important, and there is still room for creativity. And because the way fragrance companies operate, usually if you're interested and you can make contacts with brands, then you can create fragrances or work on your own niche projects. Just don't give up on opportunities, even if they seem like to be not quite what you wanted to do. And that's I think most people in this industry have that kind of experience. And the more varied experiences you have, the better it's going to be for you as far as your career, and more interesting. So another thing about fragrance industry is that the biggest centers are in big cities. It's Paris, it's New York, London, or in Mumbai, Shanghai. So if you're from a small town, then you might need to move. If becoming a perfumer is your goal, then that's something that you definitely would need to consider and ask yourself if it's worth it, if it's worth making this kind of sacrifice. For instance, a young perfumer at Perfume, Anne Ayo, was born and grew up in Spain, but she moved to France to pursue perfumery training, and because that was her dream. Her dream was working with Alberto Morillas at Perfume, and she eventually got there. So I really like that story. It definitely shows some resolve. And there are many stories like that. For instance, German perfumer Ralf Schwieger, also he learned French on his own. He moved to France to follow perfumery training, and so on. My main point today is that yes, fragrance industry on its kind of on one side is not diverse. On the other hand, there is embrace of diversity because it's a global industry and it just cannot be otherwise. So if you feel that fragrance industry is not for you, that it's just too white or whatever, that's not correct. That has not been my experience working in fragrance industry. And in fact, one of the reasons why I found it so enjoyable is again that global, that cosmopolitan and multicultural aspect. And if you have a vision, if you have a dream, if you would like to share something of your own sense, something of your olfactive interpretation of the world around you, especially that interpretation that differs, I think you can make a difference and you can get there. And right now, the time is definitely very good to try something, to take risks, to be bold, and just not to be afraid. And if I can give you one advice is just hold on to this dream and be persistent. Be persistent, be persistent. There is no other way to get into the fragrance industry, to get a position in perfumery school. Just be persistent and read, smell, learn, and I'm sure you'll be successful.